Hello, students. Today we are going to critically analyze the story The Lament or Misery, written by Anton Chekhov. So, while we are critically analyzing a story, we have to pay attention to certain aspects of the story. Firstly, what is the setting or atmosphere of the story? Secondly, what kind of characterization is done in the story? Whether the characterization is flat or the characterization is round, whether it is direct or whether it is indirect. After characterization, we pay attention to the narrative technique of the story. Then the other important aspect of the story is the tone and pace of narration. Then the next is what type of plot is used by the writer. Whether the plot is linear, whether the plot is complex. So, after reading a story, while analyzing it, we should discuss the kind of plot that is structured by the writer. Then we come to the language or figures of speech that are used in the narration. Whether the narration is simple, straightforward, or the writer has used figures of speech, metaphors, imagery. This all we discuss in this point. Then we come to the themes. What is the major theme in the story and what are the other minor themes that we find in the story? So this is how you critically analyze a short story. So now point wise we will discuss all the aspects of The Misery or Lament by Anton Chekhov. So first we are going to discuss the setting and atmosphere of the story. Generally, the first paragraph of a story is introductory in nature, in which the writer describes the setting, that is, the place or time in which the story unravels, and the main characters or protagonist of the story. So, from the first paragraph of Misery, we gather that the setting of the story is urban, that is, it is taking place in a city in Russia. It is late evening, the darkness is descending, it is snowing, and the weather is very cold. In the first paragraph, the writer has very graphically presented the scene where Iona is waiting in his sledge along with his horse for a customer. The landscape, along with the people and objects, is covered with a thin white sheet of snow. The snowy whiteness of the setting establishes an atmosphere of death and coldness. The pain that we find in the heart of the protagonist and the indifference of others towards it is reflected in the coldness of the weather. Then we come to the characterization in the story. The main character or protagonist of the story is Iona Potapov, who is a sledge driver. The whole story is woven around his attempt to find a sympathetic human connection with whom he can share his grief of losing a young son. The other characters, like the military officer or the three young men, serve as a foil to Iona by being indifferent, unsympathetic, and cruel towards him. Characterization is very realistic in story. The readers can very easily identify with the grief or misery of Iona. The focus is on the character of Iona only, that is, He is the only wrong character in the story. All the other characters are stock characters whose presence is required for the progression of the plot. The other important character in the story is the horse, because she mirrors the grief of Yona and finally lends the sympathetic ear that he had wished for from the beginning of the story. The horse, therefore, becomes an instrument of irony because she is more humane than the human beings in the story. Now we are going to discuss the narrative technique used in the story. The writer has employed a third person omniscient narrative voice. All the thoughts and desires of the protagonist are revealed to us through the authorial descriptions. But this is limited to the protagonist only. The author does not enter the consciousness of other characters, such as the military officer or the three young men. Apart from this, the narrative moves forward with the help of dialogues and descriptions of the setting and atmosphere. Throughout the narrative, the focus keeps on shifting to and fro between the protagonist and the action around him. The language used is simple and emotive. Discuss the narrative tone of the story. Anton Chekhov's excellence in story writing can be seen in his structuring of the narrative. The tone of the narrative voice of the story is emotive and meditative. Pathos is employed by the author to evoke pity, sympathy, and grief in the readers. You can see the example of pathos in the slide. The deliberative sentences are long, while the conversational dialogues are short and broken to emphasize the breakdown of communication in modern times. Next point is the plot of the story. The plot of the story is linear without any kind of time manipulation or time lapse. It is the story of an evening in the life of Iona seeking a sympathetic listener for his story of the death of his son. The action in the story can be termed as static because it is limited to Iona carrying his customers from one place to another without any kind of dramatic moments throughout the story. In the end, the protagonist finds peace in the empathetic company of his horse, who listens very patiently to his story. To the themes in the story. We find multiple themes in the story, for example, death, life versus death, alienation in modern society, and so on. The details of these themes are given in the slide. Always end your answer with a nice conclusion presenting the crux of your answer. If you found this discussion helpful, do not forget to like and subscribe. Have a good day.